I hear the train a-comin'. It's rolling around the bend. And I ain't seen the sunshine. I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. But that train keeps a-rolling. All down to San Antonio. All down to San Antonio. When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy. Don't ever play with guns.
Don't worry, 15-minute cities are the future to your success as a carbon-free citizen of the New World Order. Right now, as we speak, the lockdowns that we're put into place for COVID are being used as a blueprint for the next step in our coevolution as citizens of the free world, where we will own nothing and we will be happy. It's a diabolical plan that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but in fact, it is currently being developed, even put into place in this year. Set for mass rollout over the next decade. By 2030, they want to control everything, even down to the amount of clothes you're allowed to buy and the meat you're allowed to eat. My guest today is Jay Dyer. He is an author, comedian, TV presenter known for his deep analysis of Hollywood geopolitics and culture. His graduate work focused on psychological warfare and film. He's also the author of 2 books, Esoteric Hollywood 1 and 2, and the co-creator and co-host of the television show Hollywood Decoded, and been featured in numerous popular shows and debates with top thinkers. He's hosted the 4th hour of InfoWars on Fridays for the last 2 years, beginning at the height of COVID, and one of the most requested guests that you guys have been asking for in all time. I'd like to welcome to the show for the first time, Jay Dyer.
Wow. Most requested in a while. That deserves a soy face.
Most requested.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here. I mean, that was a real fancy introduction, but I'm sure you're well familiar with what's going on and the amount of pressure that we're going to start seeing in this concept that we're going to break down very deeply, and its ties to the World Economic Forum, its ties to Klaus Schwab, and the reasons why Donald Trump's simply not going to be the person to be able to stop it. But are you ready to live in a 15-minute city?
Well, I mean, this is basically the idea of a prison planet, right? I mean, it's like locking me down, but not locking me down. You know what I mean? So I think if you look at places like Australia, it was a test ground for these. All the Australians were really getting the brunt of this to see how do people react, how easy will it be to try to push this over on people. In my view, this goes back to older plans that come out of the last century of technocrats who want to erect a kind of a prison planet, like you said, supposedly for carbon. Of course, we're made of carbon, so that really just means carbon control means controlling humans, really, and that's what it's about. It's about total control, total surveillance, total shutting down of markets, shutting down of every aspect of the way the world used to run, and that's why it's a new era, a technotronic era, Zbigniew Brzezinski called it, and that's why Klaus calls it the 4th Industrial Revolution in his book, which everybody should read if you've not read it, because it really just lays it all out.
Yeah, it does. And we're going to break down from the very beginnings. For those of you that are listening, this is an audio-only podcast, which means that you can download it on Spotify, iTunes, wherever else you can find audio downloads. But for those that are not watching, don't have the visuals, we're going to talk about who founded this, what this is looking like today, where this is headed, and how this integrates with a greater plan of control and surveillance, and to not only track your every move, but also to control your every move. But also, I want to give a huge shout out to the FBI thug who's probably watching this show right now. I want to remind you that over the years of all the spying, the tapping that we've exposed, we are pretty much not scared anymore, but I am very tired. I'm tired of feeling like I'm always being watched and controlled in these cities, and this feeling that the government is making my money worthless. I'm tired of manipulative inflation. I'm making it impossible to feel secure. There's no eggs on the shelves. It's like, what is next? We see what's going on in China, what's happening today in Oxford and other places around the world. And I want to let you know that some of us are doing something about it. In fact, thousands of us, possibly millions of us, are buying up physical gold and silver. If you see today that China is importing gold and silver from even Swiss banks at one of the highest degrees in any country in the history of the world ever, what do they know that we don't? Well, it's not because they want some kind of insurance against inflation or some stock market crap. It's because we're all doing it because physical gold and silver insurance against the stupidity of governments. It survived the political decay of Rome, and it even survived every civilization that we know of. So it's certainly able to survive whatever nightmare scenario the government can come up with. So to help, I partner with a local precious metals company who will give you up to $10,000 in free silver with qualified accounts. Just tell them that you're a listener. Their name is Goldco, and you can call them with my special number, 855-242-4758. Call Goldco and protect just even a portion of your money with physical gold and silver right now. Get up to $10,000 in free silver just for doing it. Call them now, 855-242-4758, and or click the link in the description. Fill out the form. You're welcome. So let's just talk about this, Jay. I mean, we're going to jump into the founding of what 15-minute cities are and where this phrase came from, because just like me, you know that these people don't come up with new ideas. They just learn how to repackage them once we figure out what they're calling their current diabolical plan to take over the world. We smash it with the worst PR in history to let people know how evil they are. And instead of canceling their plans and becoming better people, they just hire a new leader and then rename the project.
Absolutely. I think that these go back to older plans that relate to who are called Fabian socialists. And I've been lecturing through some books on the history of the Fabian socialists recently. And they were tied to a lot of these high-level socialists in the British Empire that really felt like they needed to reconquer the American colonies, bring them back under the aegis of the British Empire. And one of the ways they thought they could do that was to export these kind of high-level steering committee groups, these roundtable models for how to run a government, run a society from a shadow inner core that really kind of made the elected leaders puppets. And they did that at the behest of some big power players in terms of what would basically be the Federal Reserve. So the Bank for National Settlements is kind of the central bank of central banks behind a lot of this, at least since the post-World War II period. And so they've adopted a model of what's called austerity. You might have heard a lot about austerity back 10 years ago or so when Europe was having all those banking crises that were engineered, by the way. And the bankers were pushing austerity, which was this idea that you were going to have to live way below your means. And now that's been retooled for part of this eco agenda, that for you to have private property, for you to have market access, for you to have the ability to do free economic exchange, that is actually hurting the planet. For you to have children, it's hurting the planet, right? So now you have to be brought under this total austerity model, a kind of full spectrum dominance model is what it was called about 20 years ago. And it really is an overall plan. And we've seen that it's an overall plan by the fact that in the last 3 years, it rolled out globally, right? It wasn't just America. It wasn't just the UK or EU. It was a global rollout of a coordinated agenda that's based around you not having cars, you not having property, you getting euthanasia death care, banning your travel, banning your commerce, banning, ultimately, they'd like to have, restrictions on who can even breed. That's an older technocratic plan. And this goes back again, you can go to the 90s, the Agenda 21 treaty, the Rio Treaty with Bush back in the 90s, UN Biodiversity Project. These are all part of this overall idea of rewilding, bringing back austerity, bringing banker austerity, basically, which is that World Economic Forum clip of socialism, right? You will own nothing, have nothing. You'll be happy, though, because you're going to be, pumped with drugs in your coon pod and vitamins that come through the tubes. So you won't need to go out and engage in commerce or get a job because you're going to have a universal basic income, which Bertrand Russell and H.G. Wells wrote about 100 years ago.
Right. And I think one of the most important factors of this is to also look at the fact of that they always tend to write down what they're going to do, which is something that we track over the years. These people are not just shameless, they're emboldened, right? So they genuinely press onto the public like, we're doing this. But I do want to remind you that if you call it out for what it is, you'll usually be censored, you'll be suppressed, they'll attack you, say you're a conspiracy theorist when you're reading direct sources. Now, this comes from The The Guardian as we jump into who's behind this and defining what a 15-minute city is. This specific thing says that the term itself was coined by a man named Carlos Moreno, who's a scientist at the Sorbonne who first promoted La Ville de Quart de Quer. I don't know how to speak in French. He dreamed up a city where in less than 15 minutes, a resident can access his essential life needs. I find that to be a bit sexist to assume the pronouns, but this is sort of like chrono-urbanism, which emerged a decade ago and prompted experiments in metropolises such as Portland, Oregon, and Melbourne, Australia, which we all know to be the bastions of freedom, especially over COVID. This was set their watches to 20 minutes. Now, subsequently, Moreno's conditions were not so different from existing trends or tenets of progressive city planning, such as walkability, smart growth, mixed-use zoning, missing middle housing, and ending food deserts. But the 15-minute city felt like less of an obligation than an opportunity. And so I want to begin by saying a 15-minute city in its original inception by this guy Moreno is really sounds like a great idea. And this is what all bad, sinister, tyrannical ideas, as you know, start as. It's like hey, what if we ended food deserts? What if we ended the need to buy a car, which of course is a difficult access into civilization, right? I mean, it's hard to get the money to save up, especially at a lower income family. What if we reduce pollution and traffic in inner cities? Anytime you've lived in an urban environment, these are problems that we are trying to tackle. And what I feel like begins to show you that this is not going to work, or that this has something more sinister behind it, is this when it's presented as a utopian solution, which I don't believe are possible, is that, hey, what if we fix all of the problems with this final solution? And there was a man who had a final solution at one point, and he had a utopian idea to what he believed to fix things. And I just don't think we see over history these utopian, human apex plans ever resulting in anything less than imprisonment, surveillance state, and eventually the murdering of citizens or the killing of citizens, either through starvation or through direct genocide.